I'm Michael Depp, editor of TVNewsCheck, and this is Talking TV, our weekly video podcast. This week, I'm joined by Harry Jessell, our beloved editor at large, and we're going to talk about the health of the industry generally as it goes into the next year, the hope for regulatory relief, the prospects being ushered in by generative AI, 2024 election coverage, and much, much more. We will be right back with that year-end conversation. Talking TV is brought to you by Spot On by Futuri, your solution for creating instant audio spec commercials and scripts, along with topical and promotional production. We've all experienced that sinking feeling when the facts of a lead story change after your VO talent has left for the day. With Spot On, you can make needed updates in just a few minutes. Spot On can also help sales teams impress customers with an audio spec spot right at their desk. Learn more about the many ways your station can use Spot On by visiting futurimedia.com/solutions/spot on. Welcome back, Harry Jessell, to Talking TV.
Good to see you, Michael.
It's good to see you. I'm well, thanks. And it's good to see you for you are the only person I'd want to wrap the year up with and look ahead to
I think I'm the only person qualified to do that.
The only man standing on this planet who can do exactly. So let's play a little Ghost of Christmas Past and then Ghost of Christmas Future. And let's start with the past, the year behind us. A lot of things going on. One of those things that might tell us something about, to sum up the year's, the health of the industry, are stock prices.
Well, yeah, I thought, there's a lot of ways to measure an industry. And we have some big public companies. So I thought I'd take a look at the stock prices and see how we did this year. First of all, the Dow was up 10%. The S&P was up 20%. So it must have been a good year for the TV stocks. No, they were all down 3%, 7%, 5%, 3%. Nexstar took a big hit, 32%, but it was a high flyer. It started the year 174 and is down to 142. Which is sort of a shame because Nexstar is the group I think is really trying to do some things, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later on with the CW and the News Nation. So not a great year if you believe Wall Street, but I will say they're doing better than radio. There's a couple radio groups now where you can. That are selling for under $1. Odyssey and Beasley. iHeart is not doing very well. I hope this is not the ghost of TV stations' future.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, radio is a pretty low bar, relatively speaking, but yeah, they had a lot of headwinds this year. I mean, just generally, advertising spot ad market was really challenged for a lot of this year. Wasn't a political year. Of course, they're looking at one next year and have a lot of hope with regards to a rebound there.
Well, yeah, that's the nature of this business, and I think the number was that we got from Steve Passwaiter was $10 billion, of which broadcasters will get the lion's share. So that's going to be a big hit for broadcasters, a positive hit. So they have that to look forward to, as well as the challenge of covering those elections.
Yes, which we will come to. Let's talk a little bit about the M&A year that wasn't, in many ways, starting with Tegna.
Well, yeah. This business is so heavily consolidated now that there's not much room for merger and acquisition anymore. And the one big deal was cratered by the FCC and Jessica Rosenfeld, crushing. Pardon?
Jessica Rosenworcel.
Rosenworcel. I'm sorry. She torpedoed that deal, crushing Sue Kim's opportunity to make another big score in broadcasting, and I think may have chased off some private equity money and hedge funds that might have been looking at broadcasting and their big cash flows that come in. She sort of sent a signal that you're not wanted here in broadcasting. She doesn't. She's a traditional Democrat, isn't looking for more consolidation in this industry. So that was sort of a negative for the industry, I think, overall.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But then we also have perhaps ABC on the sales block.
Well, yes, that was the story that never happened. In July, Bob Iger decides that he comes out. I think the comment was like, his linear channels may not be core to the business, which a lot of people took as a sign that he was ready to divest ABC and ESPN maybe, and his minor or smaller cable networks, and everybody got excited for a while. And um, I saw numbers for ABC, $5 billion. But just a couple of weeks ago, he sort of walks it back and says, I was just really gassing. Never mind. We believe in the future of linear TV. Maybe that means he does believe in linear TV. Maybe he just stirred up no interest in those networks as
Well, Byron Allen shot his hand up, and Nexstar seemed to be sniffing around.
Nexstar, I think, is definitely, and Byron's always sticking his hand up in the air. He's an ambitious man. One of these days, he's going to make a big score, I think. So
this would be a big one.
So that never materialized, and so I maybe let's put a positive spin on that. Let's say this is Disney recognizing once again that linear TV is core, is important for maybe creating shows that they can sell downstream. So let's take it as a positive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, people at ABC are pretty nervous, though. I don't think anybody feels like they're standing on terra firma right now.
Well, probably not a good idea if you're in the broadcasting business.
Harry, there was another big story this year with Disney and Charter.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, the other sort of endorsement of the linear TV idea was that Disney and Charter, after coming to loggerheads in September or late August over a new carriage deal, it looked like that would go bad. It looked like Charter might walk away, but they didn't. They were able to cut a deal for the ABC stations and more in the ESPN, and they got Monday Night Football up there, and so all was well. That was a sort of a short-lived crisis, and had they not done that deal, that may have had repercussions for other broadcasters trying to cut new retrans deals, and so I think it. For the time being, it secured the idea. Okay, the retrans will continue to come in. We have another year or two anyway of business as normal.
Sigh of relief.
Sigh of relief.
A little bit. Another issue this year that was substantial, still unfolding really, is around the FCC and the virtual MVPDs, and that kind of fostered a bit of a schism inside of the broadcast world.
Well, yeah, network versus affiliate, the old, they've always been at odds, more prominently at some times than at others. But the real story there is, again, Rosen Warsel has decided that she will not save broadcasters, allow them to deal directly with the virtual MVPDs, which are becoming a big part of the ecosystem now. That they will have to work through the networks, and when the networks make those deals with the virtual MVPDs, the affiliates always end up on the short end. So that was a blow, and it's like Rosen Warsel, like a lot of people, they say they love localism, but she doesn't do a whole lot to help localism by supporting TV stations. I think she thinks she's doing good by disallowing duopolies. I saw that was in the news again this week. NAB's making another run to persuade the FCC to allow network affiliates in the same market to own each other. Common ownership of two network affiliates. she's not a fan of that. She's turned down deals like that or rejected deals like that. That's something she could do. Allowing giving affiliates the right to negotiate directly with the MVPDs would have been a nice
Doesn't
thing.
roll off the tongue, does it, Harry?
No, we need another term. Can we come up with another term for that?
Yes, yes.
But what is clear, what is crystal clear is she wants to help maybe, but she doesn't quite know how to help. Let's put it like that.
Well, one of the things I suppose you could say that she did do to help, at least nominally, was a task force that was announced on ATSC3 back in April, I believe it was at the NAB show, to kind of kickstart that along, get that moving a little bit further. Doesn't seem to have been a great year for next gen TV, though, has it?
Well, it continues to bump along. Every so often you'll see that they have announced another market, but I have yet to see a real plan for generating some revenue, creating a business either through enhanced television or through data casting. I think the fact that LG, one of the big TV manufacturers, decided to take a pause in the marketing of next gen sets was not good news.
Under litigation, so it wasn't maybe a voluntary pause, but nevertheless.
But yeah, it's yeah. So that was.
And they were just to say they were the biggest boosters in the OEM world for this technology. They were the ones kind of sticking their neck out the furthest. There was a lot of ambivalence with a lot of other set manufacturers. So that was
we'll see what happens at the Consumer Electronics Show. But frankly, I don't think that's. I think it's more of a data casting business. I think that's the way it's going to go, and even in that space, there's another competitive transmission system out there, 5G. Use the same transmission system they're using for the phones. There's a faction of the LPTV industry that's sort of pushing this idea. So the ATSC proponents have to deal with that now that somebody else is after that spectrum.
They've definitely thrown some cold water on that, but I do know that some of the non-Sinclair broadcasters are trying some experiments with data casting that they've kind of been keeping a lid on. And I think some companies are just trying to manage expectations around this, that it's not going to be a panacea. But it's interesting. When I talk to general managers, these are some of the people who are the most John the Baptist about the potential. They really do believe something is coming that will be transformative, mainly in terms of like addressable advertising in many ways. And it's odd because that sort of dropped out of the national conversation. Certainly it's not leading the salient characteristics of ATSC3 when we're talking about it in a broader sense. So they still believe, even if the faith has perhaps been challenged.
Well, as Mark Aiken is always telling me, keep the faith.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there it is. So Nexstar, we touched on that before, and they've had an interesting year with their endeavor, their national network endeavors. One of them being the CW, which underwent a pretty significant reboot this year.
Well, my Nexstar or my CW story is I was at a New Jersey beach in September, wondering how I was going to watch the West Virginia Pitt football game, and I was surprised to find it on the CW. I guess they have an ACC package. I should have known that, but they do. And so I was able to watch that game sitting in a beach resort in New Jersey. I guess out of Philadelphia it was. But I think that's the right strategy they're really heavy into sports. They did a wrestling thing also. I think that's the wise way to go. I hope they can make it. I know they're investing heavily in it. At least Nexstar has sort of a growth strategy, and maybe that's why their stock is trading so much higher than their peers. Also, wasn't this the year that Scripps came out and started talking about scooping up some local sports, and we've seen some of that. And so
not only Scripps, Gray is on their
Right. Yeah.
heels. Yeah, other groups are getting in there, and definitely a lot. Sports deals were announced. It wasn't a plethora, but there was so much flux in that space, and it continues to be really. A lot of the teams in various leagues went to develop very quickly direct-to-consumer products for streaming, so they could be sure to reach their fans. But they were convinced, in many cases, that broadcast is of value to them. It was years ago when I was growing up, you could watch baseball, hockey, basketball on broadcast TV or fairly frequently, boxing. All of that went away by and large, and so those were fan recruitment devices. Those are tools for that, and I think they're seeing the wisdom of that. And so you get these 30-game packages that are popping up around the country with different teams, and they seem to be good deals, or at least the teams are willing to try it out and see how it works.
Well, I hope we see more of them. You seem to have tracked it more closely than I. I've seen a few, but I'd like to see. I think what do I know about sports marketing? But here in Pittsburgh, yeah, to do 25 or 30 games on broadcast TV and remind the people that have abandoned the cord cutters or that we still have baseball here in Pittsburgh seems to me like a no-brainer. I'd like to see it. I like to see it. I think it certainly would be a great thing for broadcasting if they could make that not as a loss leader, but as a real source of profit.
Yeah, well, Scripps is certainly probably the most bullish in that area, but Gray isn't far behind them, and I think every group is taking. Sinclair is trying to get back into that game a little bit and do some deals, and I think most groups are at least considering the possibility.
I think if Sinclair never saw another sports program again, they'd be happy.
Well, perhaps
their venture into sports has not been a good one so far.
No, but that story is done being written yet. So
okay.
Of course, tennis channel.
Keep the faith. Keep the faith.
That's right. Let's just that'll be the mantra.
That's our theme.
Absolutely. And then just lastly with Nexstar, News Nation has another year behind it now. They got a presidential Republican debate that they have hosted. Are they, do you think, moving closer to viability, acceptability with viewers?
I haven't looked at the numbers, but I was sitting in a Chinese restaurant and they could have had any TV station going on, any TV station. There's 10,000 of them, and they had News Nation on there. So they must be doing something right. Okay. I think having that Republican debate on, which for some odd reason I've been enjoying those debates. You know why? Because they're talking policy. Mm-hmm. They're talking real policy. They're talking about fixing things. There's something normal about them. But I thought that was sort of a feather in their cap. It gave a little status. They were one of the big boys.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think it is a very polished network, and
it is.
No nonsense, and very polished. They've done a nice job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so that's Christmas past. Let's look to Christmas future, 2024. There's a few things I want to bring up, just the things that I'm watching. And I think are going to be dynamics that will be important and kind of obviously important for the next year. One of them is the fast channel phenomenon, which has become wildly, explosively popular with broadcasters. All of them, I think, at this point realize or already have fast channels that they're putting in various places on vMVPDs, on the apps that are sponsored by the OEMs. They're kind of putting them. Most of them have a strategy of ubiquity and putting them in as many places as possible. It's a sort of easy to understand, intuitive business. It's linear TV streaming, simply, no VOD menu. But it is an area that also, interestingly, where there's a lot of change already happening. Some of these used to be, you'd buy like a smart television, you'd open up the app with all the fast channels inside, you'd see a lot of library content, stuff that was just kind of thrown at the wall to see what works. And that we are past that phase now, and we're in the culling phase and the reorganization, redistribution of where fast channels sit in those ecosystems. And it's definitely turning out to be the case that they have to really think about, anybody putting one of these channels out has to think about programming. It can't just be some afterthought or just wheels that are running in endless circles. that the OEMs and other more prized real estate wants to see original programming. They want to see dynamism. They want to see live. And so it would seem that every broadcast group right now needs to
When
think.
you say OEM, is that what are we talking about?
The set manufacturers, so the LGs, the
Oh,
Samsungs,
okay.
anybody who's got and every TV basically now is a smart TV, and so
Oh, I
which is
see.
to come with loads of hundreds of fast channels. But if you want to have a good place in that channel lineup, then you've got to have good stuff there. So there can't be any passivity about the programming. So I think we're going to go into this interesting year of prioritizing that platform and what it can do, and just being much more
I
active.
have to tell you, when I turn on my TV and I look at I use Roku. When I look at those, I can go down search channels, and it's just a clutter of stuff. And sometimes you see something that might be you might think is interesting. You go in there, it's second-rate stuff. It looks like a lot of clutter. Uh,
Well, yeah, it's
as
got
you
a
as you
diginet kind of quality to it sometimes, in the worst sense of diginets. But again, that stuff is getting stale, and it's not. It was sort of placeholder material in the fast ecosystem, and now we're moving into this more. I hate to use the word, but curated kind of sensibility about those channels.
Well, here's what I want to know is what am I going to do with all these pay streams that I'm paying for? I can't keep paying for them. I think they sort of like barnacles. You go through, I just collect them. I don't think I got them all, and I got to do something.
Well,
Can
so
we get,
that's
can we
something.
get to the consolidation phase of this?
Bundling. Well, the consolidation phase is happening for sure, but before that, we're going to see the bundling phase, and that word has already been thrown out by a few executives just in the last couple of weeks. It is coming. I think Apple TV and Paramount are talking about bundling, and there are others that are under consideration right now. That bundling is going to happen, as people predicted years ago. The a la carte nature of streaming and buying streaming services has become onerously expensive, just on par with what people were paying for their cable bills. And so what's the value proposition really there? So we're going to see some culling of the herd. We're going to see some bundling. There's just going to be endless volatility in that space. So keep watching
Well,
it.
I guess the story is that none of these things are particularly profitable, right? I mean,
No,
so they no, they are not.
well, many of
Uh,
them are. I mean, Netflix tends to, by and large, to be pretty successful, but you have to have a massive, massive library, and that bundling is right. Even when you have a big library with lots of good titles, it's got to be super enormous to really sustain. Of course, having all that programming costs a lot of money. The technology itself costs a ton of money, and people don't realize. They think it all just wafts in the cloud. There are server farms, massive infrastructure costs to running these things, and so these were not small businesses that were quick to get off the ground and inexpensive. They were enormously expensive, and then you add in the programming costs to make the best programming that we've ever seen in some ways in the history of television.
right.
High cinematic production values, this cost a fortune, and this is all weighing on everybody's balance sheets right now as we're going into 2024.
Back in the day, it always irritated me that you had to get both HBO and excuse me, you had to get both HBO and Showtime, and I'm feeling the same way that
Seems like quaint days
if I
then.
want to get all the stuff that I want to get, I really have to do all those channels, and
And you
they all
work
have
three
some
jobs to
value.
pay for it.
Pardon?
You have to work three jobs to pay for it all too.
Yeah.
Basically.
So
So
what
there's
else?
a couple other
What else
things
is
I want
going
to talk
on?
about. Well, the major thing to watch, I think, for next year, maybe the most important thing since the advent of the internet, and I'm not even being hyperbolic here, is generative AI and its potential not only to change every part of our life, every industry. It's going to affect broadcasters, and it's going to affect them imminently. When I was at the IBC show in Amsterdam back in September, the word, every single booth there was repeating like a mantra the word efficiency, because everybody realized they needed to get more efficiency out of their technologies than they have been getting. They need to lighten the load on people who are working in news, who are overworked. They need to get rid of redundant activities that go on routinely in newsrooms. And AI, generative AI, has the opportunity to wend into so many facets of news production and make these and lighten the workload, do incredible good potentially toward reducing the kind of redundancies that are out there, helping, for instance, with versioning content for multiple platforms, which is a very onerous part of people's jobs at TV stations, as one example. It has so many appeals, and it's becoming so much more precise, so sharp, and so intelligent. It's machine learning, so it's always learning from what it's doing. And its appeal to news producing companies is enormous in many levels. They are also extremely wary of the knock-on effects that it brings with it.
I'm sorry, what kind of effects?
The knock-on effects of just various things that will happen that as a result of adoption that you have to consider. One of the things, for instance, being the major trust issues that consumers have with all sorts of television, both local and national television, TV stations at this point. When you're employing AI at any level of the news process, and it can be employed at every level, from news gathering to writing material, editing, all of this stuff can be automated. It can intermediate itself in very minute and very substantive ways that you might consider to be authorial in some ways. The industry now has to reckon with, how do you tell viewers about how you're using it? If you are, what sort of disclosures do you offer there? And if you do disclose, I just read something today that viewers want to know when it's being employed, but they trust you less when you tell them. So, you got a real conundrum there, because
yeah, really. Are you hip to what happened to Sports Illustrated?
Sports Illustrated, Gannett. I mean, those who have used it compositionally to write stories. And mind you, AP's been using it for years in that regard. They have these sort of templatized stories that they use to report earnings for a lot of small companies. That allowed them to produce a lot more earnings coverage than they had been doing, because they create a written template and they plug in data points that are sort of scraped with the AI. They did the same thing for minor league sports and baseball. And we're talking like 5 or so years ago. It's been out there, and they were fully transparent about its use there. Other groups are murkier in the way that they have used it.
Well, SI, which I consider a great journalistic brand, I don't know what it is lately. I don't read it. They were making up reporters. I mean, they were using stock photos and putting little blurbs at the end of the story. I mean,
and I still don't think as of this moment, they have not come completely clean with what happened there. But it does enormous damage to the credibility of the brand. Of course, SI has had some damage done, going into this. And I think it's often groups that are in dire straits, like Gannett, who are using it very liberally. But some TV station groups, look, many of the SVPs of news that I talk to in local station groups have a high, very elevated level of concern about it. They know they have to deal with it. They know it's kind of fashioning into an arms race where someone is going to start using it, and they're going to get a competitive edge by doing so. So they can't just stick their head in the sand about it. The stage that they are mostly at right now as groups is to form a sort of steering committee or some sort of internal apparatus that can start to assimilate all the information, the developments that are going on around this world. And they are coming daily, fast and thick, to try to get a handle on simply what is the narrative around this technology, how can it be used, and what are the pitfalls we need to be aware of. And there are also industry-wide consortia that are beginning to consolidate around this, around subsets of the AI issue. For instance, content authenticity. And we've had some podcasts and other material just this year about this subject. How do you authenticate stuff? It's so easy. AI is so can be weaponized as sort of tool of manipulation of content. And what do you do? How do you discern that? How do you prevent your own content from being in some way altered and misused once it's out in the wild? And so there are technologies being developed to watermark things once they're disseminated, and there's a sort of manifest that follows it. It's extremely complicated, and it's an arms race between the sort of bad actors using AI and the news organizations who want to use it to good effect. This whole.
Let me interrupt you. What would you advise the broadcasters? You say there's a sort of a downside to transparency, right?
There
If
is,
you're
there
being
is.
too honest.
Yeah, well, so it seems. I mean, there was one report that found that viewers then have a wary eye that they raise around that. So, but there's already a handful of news organizations who are wholly creating content with AI that you can just get rid of reporters altogether. So I mean, this is one of the facets that's going to have to be dealt with, and it does present. It should be really clear that if companies broadly adopt generative AI into their newsrooms, it doesn't seem possible that positions won't be eliminated in the process. And these are positions that require a lot of critical intelligence. And so, I don't want to say that producers all need to be worried about their job security per se, but the notion of a Gen AI filling the many facets of the producer role is imminent, and many other roles. You can have an AI generated synthetic anchor or an avatar of one of your existing real human anchors right now. That technology is
Well,
out.
TVNewsCheck has been sort of on the cutting edge of reporting that they can't find producers. So, it sounds to me nobody's going to lose their job. They're just
Probably,
this
probably
may
not.
save stations.
Well, Harry, I have disclosure for you. You've been talking to an AI this whole time. I'm not actually me. It's just my avatar. Just kidding. But it's close. It's close. We're close to that. And so the point is broadcasters need to lean into this. They need to pay close attention, read everything they can. They should have a point person or group if they don't have that now already. And these groups, these people are going to have to make some very consequential choices over the next months and year with regards to this
Well, that's
technology.
great editorial fodder. That's something that
But yeah, I mean, we're all over it.
you should be. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're all over it. I just want to bring up one last thing I think that we're all going to obviously be looking at for next year and deeply concerned about, which is coverage of the 2024 election, because you have a very, very difficult needle to thread, even just looking through the lens of local television stations here, where everything is politicized at every single level. You can't just say, well, we're local, we're not national, we don't have to worry about the same trust issues. They do. The mistrust has widened and it's deeply impacted local news. And they cannot put their heads in the sand with regards to engaging the deeply polemicized viewerships that they have right now. And so, Trump is almost certain to be the Republican nominee and Biden the Democratic nominee. And with more and more utterances coming from Trump that are deeply, concerningly anti-democratic in nature, as in threatening the sort of the core tenets of the republic, stations have to wrestle with how they present that language, its consequences, what we know, if in his particular candidacy, issues that are raised that are very, very serious, potentially to the future of U.S. democracy as we have long known it. They risk in engaging that to any degree utter alienation of Republican voters, for instance. And to abdicate in any way, they risk alienating Democratic voters or just generally left-leaning voters who feel that abdication is a failure of responsibility. And so on that front, again, they're going to have to make daily decisions about coverage, and they've struggled with this, and they continue to struggle with it, about how to contextualize all of this. They're going to have to do and how to get out of the horse race to talk about the larger issues that affect the state of the republic right now. So those are some serious things that they're going to have to grapple with, as well as the safety of their reporters. I mean, the reporters are assaulted in small ways and large ways, much more than people realize in this country. It is a dangerous job. They're in the crosshairs. People have been whipped up into a kind of frenzy, and they feel very, very free about attacking verbally or otherwise, or making threats on social media or in person, reporters at every level. And so every single newsroom is going to have to develop protocols and keep iterating those protocols and have security with their reporters when they're in situations that could become dangerous. And so many more situations can become dangerous now. So,
okay, here's a question for you. You want to pontificate, sir? Are broadcasters have a responsibility, or are they liable because of the nature. I mean, they're going to take all this political advertising in next year, right? And a lot of it is provocative. A lot of it is pretty nasty. Can get pretty nasty. Doesn't that sort of fuel this conflict out there in the real world? So you're sort of warning broadcasters that they're going to have a tough time covering this election next year. At the same time, they're sort of whipping up the electorate just by posting these by broadcasting those ads. It's sort of, yeah. I didn't use the word responsible because they're not, because of the way the law is written. They are not liable for a lot of what goes into those ads. Their obligation is to air them pretty much as they receive them. What do you think?
Well, like you said, their responsibilities are somewhat limited. They're certainly not going to turn down that money. They need it badly. But, it kind of also circles around to a broader media literacy problem that we have in this country, where, a lot of viewers conflate everything they see into one big kind of organism. They don't make these delineations. And we've done a terrible job as a country, given how saturated we are with media. We have an electorate which is ill-informed in many, many, many cases, and conflates a lot of material. Of course, those problems are conflated by some news organizations themselves, particularly on cable, particularly in prime time, where this conflation of opinion and news is just wholly realized at this point. So we have that problem to untangle, and no immediate solution presenting itself. If I could dictate something to the industry, I would advise trying to weave in media literacy efforts more often into their programming in small and large ways, if they could, to help viewers understand and unpack critically the things with which they are being presented. And you can do that in all sorts of ways. But right now, this problem does face us immediately. And these are the dynamics that are already well in motion. And so we got to play the hand that we've been dealt.
I think that's a good answer. Media literacy, and broadcasters, I think, should do that. It gets back to transparency, what they're doing, what's really happening out there. When the politicians say this, what do they really mean? And who's to be, I hate to use the word trust. I don't think they should stand in judgment, just to know that, I guess, at the very least, know what the incentives that are driving media, understand the economics of the business, so viewers can sort of understand, why they do some of the things that they do. I think that'd be a good industry-wide campaign for the industry, for broadcasters to undertake.
And let me say, at the same moment, it should be clear that a lot of groups have made great leaps forward in just the last couple of years in the way that they're covering stories, in realizing that they need to build transparency more into the process, what they're showing viewers, and showing them behind the curtain of news production a little bit more than they ever have, trying various creative ways to be more transparent. And the product is everywhere that you can see of that nature. And there has been great improvement. They are trying to meet the moment in that sense. So I'm optimistic that an effect of all of this has been that most of the major groups have been introspective about their news product, and they have been iterating it much more dramatically than they have for decades.
Well, they are still considered the most trusted source of news. So they got to be careful not to lose that.
Yes, exactly. And they know it. Well, I think a good note to leave it on is the prospect of trust, and hope springs eternal. Harry, it's been great talking with you once again, and looking back and ahead to 2024. We'll see you next year.
Okay. Yes, sir. See you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And you can watch past episodes of Talking TV at TVNewsCheck.com, as well as on our YouTube channel. We will be back in the new year with a whole slate of new Talking TV podcasts every Friday, and look forward to seeing you then. Have a good new year. Talking TV is available to watch on TVNewsCheck.com. You can also watch and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.